Imagine a woman who, in an era when women were not allowed to attend university, when their minds were considered inferior to men, when their place was believed to be in the home, defied every convention, every expectation, and every barrier that society placed in her path. Imagine a woman who fled her homeland to escape political persecution, who worked as a governess and a tutor to support herself, who fell in love with a married man and was publicly humiliated for it, and who, in the face of unimaginable personal tragedy, went on to become the first person in history to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields. This is the story of Marie Curie, a woman whose name has become synonymous with brilliance, dedication, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. But here is what most people do not realize about Marie Curie. The woman who discovered radium and revolutionized medicine was also a woman who was so devoted to her work that she carried radioactive materials in her pockets, who slept with test tubes of radium beside her bed, who was so consumed by her research that she often forgot to eat, and who ultimately gave her life for the very science that made her famous. She was not just a scientist, she was a martyr to knowledge, a woman whose passion for discovery was so intense that it literally consumed her from the inside out. To understand Marie Curie, you have to go back to the beginning, to the cobblestone streets of Warsaw, Poland, where she was born Maria Salomea Sklodowska on November 7th, 1867, into a country that did not officially exist, a nation that had been carved up and divided between 3 empires. Poland was under the oppressive rule of the Russian Empire, and the Polish people were subjected to systematic discrimination, cultural suppression, and educational restrictions. Her parents, Władysław and Bronislawa Sklodowski, were both educators, passionate patriots who instilled in their children a deep love of learning and a fierce commitment to their Polish heritage. Her father was a physics and mathematics teacher, a man who was so devoted to his students that he was often willing to work without pay. Her mother was the director of a prestigious girls' school, a woman of immense intelligence and strength, but also a woman who was deeply afflicted by tuberculosis, a disease that would eventually claim her life. Maria was the youngest of 5 children, a bright, curious, and intensely focused girl who excelled in her studies. She had a photographic memory and an insatiable appetite for knowledge, and she would often spend hours reading in the dim light of the family's modest apartment. She was a girl who was determined to make something of herself, to rise above the poverty and the oppression that surrounded her, and to honor the legacy of her parents through her own achievements. The death of her mother, when Maria was just 11 years old, was a devastating blow, a loss that would shape her character and fuel her ambition for the rest of her life. Her sister Zofia had also died of typhus a few years earlier, and the family was left in a state of profound grief. Maria was a deeply introverted and melancholic child, and she retreated into her studies, finding solace in the order and certainty of mathematics and science. She was determined to continue her education, but she faced an almost insurmountable obstacle. Women were not allowed to attend university in Russian-occupied Poland. The only path to higher education for a young woman was to attend the Flying University, a secret underground institution that operated in defiance of the Russian authorities, where Polish intellectuals gathered to teach and learn in secret, constantly at risk of arrest and deportation. It was a dangerous and exhausting existence, but Maria was undeterred. She attended secret lectures at night, studied frantically during the day, and worked as a governess to support herself and her sister. She was a woman who was determined to overcome every obstacle that society placed in her path. The next turning point in her life was a pact she made with her older sister, Bronislawa. They agreed that Maria would work as a governess to support Bronislawa's medical studies in Paris. And once Bronislawa was established, she would help Maria with her own education. It was a sacrifice that required immense patience and determination, and Maria spent years working as a tutor and a governess for wealthy families in the Polish countryside, enduring the loneliness and the drudgery of her existence in the hope of a brighter future. She wrote in her diary about her longing for a life of intellectual purpose, of her frustration with the endless monotony of her days. She felt like a caged bird, trapped by the limitations that society had placed on her sex. But she never lost sight of her goal. She saved every penny she could, and in 1891, at the age of 24, she finally made the journey to Paris to study at the Sorbonne. She arrived in the City of Light with a small trunk of belongings and a heart full of dreams. Her life in Paris was one of almost unimaginable hardship and isolation. She lived in a tiny, unheated attic room with no running water and no electricity. She would study late into the night, her fingers numb with cold, her body weakened by the lack of food. She often subsisted on nothing but bread and butter, sometimes going for days without a proper meal. She was a woman who was consumed by her work, a woman who had no time for the frivolities of social life. She was a lonely figure, a brilliant but impoverished young woman who was struggling to survive in a city that was both exhilarating and unforgiving. She was also a woman who was determined to prove herself, to show the world that a woman's mind was no less capable than a man's. She excelled in her studies, graduating first in her class in physics and second in mathematics. She had achieved what she had set out to do. She was now Marie Curie, a scientist in her own right. She began to work in a research laboratory, and it was there that she was introduced to a young physicist named Pierre Curie. The meeting would change her life forever. Pierre Curie was a brilliant, introverted scientist who was also deeply devoted to his work. He was a man who was not intimidated by Marie's intelligence, a man who saw her as an intellectual equal and a kindred spirit. They fell in love, a love that was built on mutual respect, shared ambition, and a deep, abiding passion for science. They were married in 1895, and they began to work together on a project that would define their lives and change the course of science. They were fascinated by the mysterious rays that were being emitted by uranium, a phenomenon that had been discovered by the physicist Henri Becquerel. They began to investigate the source of these rays, and they discovered that the rays were not coming from the uranium itself, but from the element's atoms. This was a radical idea, a challenge to the fundamental assumptions of physics. They coined the term radioactivity to describe the phenomenon, and they began a systematic search for other elements that exhibited the same property. The work was grueling and dangerous. They worked in a tiny, dilapidated shed which they used as a laboratory. It was unheated, poorly ventilated, and filled with toxic fumes. They would spend hours stirring massive vats of pitchblende, a radioactive ore, boiling and filtering the material in an attempt to isolate the mysterious element that was causing the radioactivity. It was a laborious and painstaking process, a process that would have broken the spirit of anyone less dedicated. But Marie and Pierre were driven by a shared obsession, a desire to unlock the secrets of the universe. They endured the cold, the exhaustion, and the constant exposure to radiation, unaware of the terrible price they would ultimately pay. In 1898, they announced the discovery of two new elements, polonium, named for Marie's native Poland, and radium, a word derived from the Latin word for ray. It was a breakthrough, a scientific triumph that would earn them international acclaim. But the discovery came at a terrible cost. The constant exposure to radiation was slowly destroying their health. The Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Marie and Pierre Curie and Henri Becquerel in 1903, a recognition of their groundbreaking work. Marie was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, a milestone that was met with both admiration and skepticism from the scientific community. The prize brought fame and fortune, but it also brought intense scrutiny and personal tragedy. In 1906, Pierre was killed in a tragic accident, run over by a horse-drawn carriage on a rainy Paris street. The loss was devastating, a blow that Marie would never fully recover from. She was left alone to raise their two young daughters and continue the work they had begun together. She threw herself into her research with renewed intensity, pouring her grief into her work, and in 1911 she won a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for her discovery of radium and polonium. She was the first person to win Nobel Prizes in two different fields, a testament to her unparalleled intellect and determination. But the price of her success was immense. She was subjected to a vicious campaign of slander and personal attacks led by the French press, which was scandalized by the revelation of her affair with a married physicist, Paul Langevin. She was called a foreigner, a homewrecker, and a dangerous woman. She was publicly humiliated, and she was nearly denied her second Nobel Prize because of the scandal. She was a woman who had been vilified by the very society she had sought to improve. The criticism was a devastating blow to her reputation and her sense of self. She was a woman who had sacrificed everything for her work, and the world responded with cruelty. She retreated into her laboratory, seeking refuge in the one place where she was still respected and valued, the world of science. She continued her research, pouring her energy into the development of X-ray technology. During the First World War, she became a tireless advocate for the use of X-rays in battlefield medicine. She mobilized a fleet of mobile X-ray units known as Little Curies, which provided vital medical assistance to wounded soldiers. She personally trained medical personnel and traveled to the front lines, operating the X-ray machines and providing emergency medical care. She was a woman who had dedicated her life to the pursuit of knowledge, and she was now using that knowledge to save lives. She was a hero, a woman who had risked everything to serve her adopted country. She was also a woman who was physically declining. The constant exposure to radiation had taken a terrible toll on her body. She was suffering from aplastic anemia, a condition that was directly caused by her years of exposure to radium and polonium. Marie Curie died on July 4, 1934, at the age of 66. She was buried next to her husband in a cemetery in Sceaux, France. Her body was so radioactive that it had to be sealed in a lead-lined coffin, a grim testament to the sacrifices she had made for her work. She was a woman who had given her life for science, a woman who had been both a victim and a champion of the very forces she had helped to unleash. Her notebooks are still stored in lead-lined boxes, and they will remain radioactive for another 1,500 years. She was a woman who had literally become a part of the science she had studied. The legacy of Marie Curie is one of the most profound and enduring in human history. She is remembered as a symbol of scientific brilliance, a trailblazer who shattered glass ceilings and opened the door for generations of women in science. Her work on radioactivity laid the foundation for the development of nuclear energy and cancer treatments. She established the Curie Institutes in Paris and Warsaw, which remain at the forefront of medical research to this day. Her name is enshrined in the periodic table, in the unit of measurement for radioactivity, and in the pantheon of the greatest scientists who ever lived. She is a heroine, a figure of inspiration for people around the world. She is a testament to the power of the human spirit, a reminder that dedication and perseverance can overcome even the most formidable obstacles. But there is a darker side to her legacy, a legacy of sacrifice and suffering that is often overlooked. She is a symbol of the dangers of scientific obsession, a cautionary tale about the price of knowledge. She was a woman who gave up everything for her work, including her own health and well-being. She was a woman who was so devoted to her work that she became a martyr to it. She is a reminder that scientific advancement is not without its costs, that the pursuit of knowledge can be a dangerous and consuming obsession. She is a warning that the world is not always ready for the brilliance of those who dare to challenge the status quo. Why should someone born today still care about Marie Curie? Because her life is a testament to the power of the human mind and the resilience of the human spirit. She was a woman who defied every expectation, who overcame every obstacle, and who made contributions to science that have saved millions of lives. She was a woman who believed in the power of knowledge to make the world a better place. She was a woman who was not afraid to sacrifice everything for the pursuit of truth. She was a woman who showed the world that a woman's mind is just as capable as a man's, that intelligence and determination know no gender. She was a woman who proved that even the most impossible dreams can be achieved with enough hard work and dedication. She is a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is one of the noblest endeavors that a person can undertake, and that it is never too late to change the world. She was a woman who gave her life for science, and in doing so, she gave the world a gift that will never be forgotten. Marie Curie once wrote, "I am one of those who think that science has great beauty. A scientist in his laboratory is not only a technician, he is also a child, placed before natural phenomena which impress him like a fairy tale." She was a scientist, but she was also a dreamer, a woman who saw the universe as a place of profound mystery and wonder. She was a woman who was not afraid to ask the big questions, and she was not afraid to seek the answers. She was a woman who was not afraid to be brilliant, to be ambitious, and to be herself. She was a woman who changed the world, and her story will continue to inspire generations to come. She was a woman who was willing to sacrifice everything for the pursuit of knowledge, and she will never be forgotten. She is a reminder that the world is a better place because of those who dare to dream, who dare to question, and who dare to devote their lives to the pursuit of truth. She is a legend, a hero, and a symbol of the best of humanity.